Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Elizabeth McCormick. She is a speaker and author who draws on her experience as a former U.S. Army Black Hawk pilot to speak on leadership, resilience, and overcoming obstacles. So for those of you who are considering becoming speakers, you may have a lot of questions that involve how to get speaking engagements, how to price your services, how to make that jump to being a full-time speaker. And so there's a number of questions, and I suspect Elizabeth will have some answers for them. So welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Elizabeth.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So when it comes to the topics that you speak on, Elizabeth, how did you come to those topics?
So it's all about relevancy. So I didn't think at first. At first, I thought it was about the story, right? Well, I have a great story. And people say, oh, you have a great story. Well, the story will only carry you so far. So it really is about how it relates to the audiences you're speaking to. So what I would say is do an analysis of your story and say, what did I learn from that? And how can that relate to the audience I want to speak to? And that's the actual more important part. The story has to be good, don't get me wrong, but it also has to resonate and be relevant because you don't want people sitting in the audience going, well, what does that have to do with me?
Absolutely. You definitely don't want that, especially if there's other things they could be doing besides speaking to you. You're absolutely right. There needs to be some sort of relevancy. But
Well, when you start getting to the big conferences, you're competing against the beach and the bar. So it better be good.
yes. Well, I mean, if it's December, depending where it is, maybe not the beach, but certainly the bar.
Certainly the bar. Certainly the bar. Depends on the time of the year and where it's located at.
Yeah, for sure. Another question that I think a lot of people who are listening or watching our conversation, Elizabeth, may have is they have this idea of becoming a speaker, and I think a lot of times when people hear speaker, they think keynote. But I suspect there's quite a number of other things that people can do besides be a keynote. Or what type of services do you provide?
I am primary keynote. That's what I mostly do, but I also do workshops. So a lot of times I'll do the keynote, and then because they have a spot to fill on their program, again being a solution for them, I'll also do a breakout that's different than the keynote. You can do emceeing, you can do a panel facilitation. I've done that before. That's a lot of fun. There's lots of things that you can do that involve the spoken word that can be paid or for marketing to get you known, that can help you with the speaking business.
For those that are thinking of going down this path, what types of things do they need to have in place for them to really put themselves out there as a speaker?
Okay, so I actually interviewed when I first started because I was getting laid off from a corporate job, and I had been told, oh, you have a story, you need to do this. So I actually interviewed a speaker bureau, which is a company that books speakers for their clients. And so I scheduled a call with them. Now, mind you, it took me weeks to get the call. And then I show up for the meeting and they're like this. Like they don't want to, they didn't want to really talk to me because I didn't have anything ready. And I knew that. So I looked at the speaker rep and I said, what do I need for you to come after me? And they told me 6 things that I needed. And since then, I've put those 6 things in a book called The Bookability Factor, 67 Tips to Getting Booked and Paid as a Keynote Speaker. But I've also spelled that out and everything I wish I'd known when I first started. So the first thing is a message. And it's not just the story, right? It's how the message relates. It's how your message creates a brand. And that's one thing I've been told did really good from the beginning is I really made, like for me, being a Black Hawk pilot, a brand, right? So what can you do to make something, an element of a story or something into a brand and then make that story relevant to the audiences? So that's huge. The message, in fact, in my book, there's 67 tips, 23 are just about the message. It's that important because if you skip it and go straight into marketing and the message isn't right, it's not going to land, to use a pilot term, right? It's not going to land. So second is marketing. So that would be, knowing your marketing message, what's your unique selling proposition, what do they want for you? For me, I use Energize Your Events because I am a super high energy keynote speaker, great for opening a conference, closing a conference, or that dreaded after lunch spot. Like those are the ones I volunteer for. So, creating that energy and engagement and not just energizing, I'm energizing, but I energize their people. So like knowing what that main message is. Maybe, you mentioned, Neil, in my beginning, in the introduction, about leadership, resilience. Those all came after, right? So those are like what I call the sneak attack lessons that fit in to what they're looking for, and make it relevant. But what I really do is get their audiences fired up and excited and present in what they do, and then tie that to relevant to the resilience, leadership, the different things they're looking for. So that's two so we got message, we got marketing. The third one comes from the marketing, and it's a website. You got to have a website up and running. Nowadays, there's so many easy and inexpensive ways to do a website. Kind of the general rule, and not a hard and fast rule, but a general rule in the industry is whatever you want to get paid to speak, you should invest in a website. So because it shows up. I'm on my fifth website redesign right now, in the middle of it. It's not quite done yet, so give it a couple months, it'll be done, of my domain. And it's now moving into that luxury, high-end kind of level where it looks like I'm worth the check I want them to cut. Okay, so website. And then the next one is what you need on the website is video. Having to have a video. Nowadays, if you do anything else, I would do the video first. So because you could market really well with a video and get booked before the website. So you almost could flip those. But again, if your message isn't good, if your marketing isn't good, the video isn't going to be good, right? And so you've got to have some practice and some what I call reps, right? You got to have some repetition in to get it good, so that it's worth getting videoed. But my recommendation is you video it from the very beginning. And one of the things I did that most people aren't willing to do is I would video or audio every single speech I did, and then I would listen to it on the way home. So I wanted to hear where I was good, where I messed up, and yes, I've messed up plenty. So and when I first started, I had jokes I thought were hilarious and nobody else laughed, right? So you got to really, and one of the things I did is when I audio record from the audience. I leave my phone on a voice memo face down so they can't see. And it's not for use, it's just for me. I want to hear where they laughed. I want to hear where they go, I want to hear where they have some kind of reaction, because then I know it's good. Or if it's a bad reaction, it's bad, right? So I would record the audience, and that's what I'd listen to as I was driving home or flying home or traveling home. So, okay, so we've got message, marketing, website, video. What do you think is next?
What do I think is next? Maybe a one sheet?
It's a book. So one sheet would fall under marketing. So
Okay.
anything print, anything like that, marketing collateral. So a book would be next. And there's a reason it's at the end, because you really got to solidify your message and your audience and everything before you go into a book. So my 20th book comes out later this year. That's not normal. So that's a lot. There's not very many that do that. But what I did is I had my big book that has the stories I tell from stage. And then I've done 18 tip books on different topics that I could speak on. Okay, so I have 50 tips to blank. Just like the bookability factor is one of those 67 tips to getting booked and paid as a keynote speaker, right? So having different tip books, and then I made them into a series. I have a corporate series and I have a business growth series for people that own a business or are marketing a business or an association. I just spoke for a big association in Arizona, and I sold out. I sold out of the business growth sets because they were all growing chapters of their association, and they wanted to have that kind of content. So, and then the business one is more for corporations, is about healthy organizational culture, communication, coaching skills to empower other people to lead. And then I'm working on a final one on that one. Right now I've got LinkedIn in there, but it's going to change to a negotiation. How do you negotiate negotiate an interview? How do you negotiate a promotion, a raise, different things like that are going to be in that one. And then my 20th book is going to come out later this year. First of the year is another big book that has a collection of stories that I've now developed over time and I can tell from stage as well. So having a book, here's what having a book does. It gives you another negotiation point. Sometimes, especially when you're first starting off, you might speak for free. I spoke for 163 Rotary clubs in 18 months when I first started, just to polish my content and get good. And what happened is after about 40, it did get good. I could feel rhythm. I could feel the polish. And then after about 60, I started getting referred back to their corporations and paid engagements. So it allowed me to develop, and you go anywhere, you go to any Rotary Club in Dallas and you ask them who are some of the best speakers you have, most likely they're going to mention me, right? Because I've spoken to so many of them, and I still get calls, and I'm like, oh, I only do short notice now, whereas a speaker canceled and it's tomorrow or later today, and I'm in town and I'm not booked. Then that's the only time I do those free ones now anymore. But it helped me at the beginning, and it helped me have the repetition in where it got really, really good. But at that event, if you don't have something to sell, you're not making any money, right? Because you get a chicken dinner or chicken lunch or a breakfast, right? But you're not making any money. So having a book concurrently in those early days can help you have something to sell. The other thing a book does is it allows you to negotiate. So let's see, my event today, we're going to get into that next, I'll tell you about, but the event I have tomorrow in San Antonio, they bought a book for every person. So when I book them, when I negotiate the contract, I asked them if they want a book for every person. And the person I was talking to, which was not the final decision maker, the person I was talking to was like, oh, no. You're maxing out our budget as it is. Fine, no problem. But I still put it in the contract that they have the option to purchase a book at special event pricing for blank for every attendee. They can't buy it just for 10 people. They have to buy it for every single person is the deal. And then they get bulk pricing. And with that, in 2019, that's the last year I have this data really analyzed because of the pandemic. It's been a little skewed since. It's really back though. So I'll have some data next year. But in 2019, I sold $35,000 of books from that clause. Ones that said no, they weren't going to buy a book. And then when the boss reads the contract, they go, wait, are we executing this clause? This is a good deal. We'll pull it from a different budget. Or about 6 weeks before the event, my virtual assistant sends them an email and says, would you like to execute the clause? And by then they know their budget better. They know if they have sponsors. So they add the book towards the end. I need 6 weeks notice to make sure I have enough books on hand and get them signed and sent. So we send them an email at 6 weeks and say, would you like to execute the clause? Cut and paste. And shockingly, like the one tomorrow, it said yes. And so I signed books and I shipped them ahead, and they have them there on site for their event. So it has allowed me to add additional revenue as well as negotiation for the event. If I know I maxed out their budget and say it's an association that the audience could all refer me to other events, then I might go ahead and say, you know what, I'm willing to give you the books for free if you pay the shipping, because that's a business card that they're not going to throw away, having a book in their hand. So the book is highly valuable. It's just we're getting really clear on who the book's for and what the message that you want to convey in it is. So my next book coming out is called Just Fly, First Lead Yourself. So, which fits into my brand a little bit.
All
All right,
right.
ready for the last one, Neil? There's one
Last
more.
one. Yeah, one more.
Last one. You asked me a big question. So the last one, the sixth item in the bookability factors is back of the room sales. That's what I'm doing today. As soon as we're done, I'm heading to another event, and they didn't want to buy books for every person, but they are willing to let me have a table and sell books in the back of the room. So what do you have to sell? For me, with the speaker bureau at that very beginning at that lunch where she had her arms crossed, back of the room was really a way for speaker bureaus. They get a cut right from their client for brokering the deal. But back of the room is a way that they can also make additional revenue, because she's like, if you don't have something, a mastermind group, an online course, something to sell after the event, like they get 10 or 25% of that. Right. So they wanted us to have more than just the fee that we could sell. But what happens is 90% of my bookings are not with a bureau. So now I have back of the room and I make more money as well. So, and again, if they're not going to buy a book for every person, they have a way to have my book in their hand that can then take them to another event, or to, I've had family members call me. My dad told me, saw you at an event and I hire speakers for my event. Would you come in and do mine too? So like, that's what you want, is to be so good in your message that they then, and then the back of the room or a book, they have something to take back that helps them remember you.
Okay.
That's it. That's all of them, Neil.
No, this is great. Message, marketing, website, video, book, back of room sale. That's a solid list, Elizabeth.
It is a solid list. I
That's
take no credit for it. The bureau that I interviewed, and let me tell you, it took me weeks and weeks and weeks of calling that bureau every single day to get that interview. Don't do that. Just get Bookability Factor, my book, or use those six things, because it is truly, that tip book is and it's easy tips, but it's everything I wish I had known when I first started.
How should an aspiring speaker go about pricing their services?
Pricing's hard. I can tell you there's one event I did at the very beginning that somebody from my church recommended me to, and I left $9,000 on the table. Right? I didn't know. So pricing is tough, and pricing is personal. So if you are just starting off and you have time, do what I did, do the Rotary clubs and do stuff for free to help get the word out, right? If you didn't, if you're like working a CEO, an executive, and you don't have the time, then price your services really high. Make it worth your while, right? So pricing is really subjective. It's what do you think you're worth? What do you think the solutions you provide in that speech is worth? And then compare that to, what is their budget? So for me now, I have a nonprofit fee. I have a for-profit fee, right? So it just, and then is it a small event? Is it a small event? Do you think they're going to, if it's only 20 people, or do you think they're going to spend as much as they would if they had 20,000 people? Right? It's not the same. So you really have to, like, those are questions you want to ask. So I would typically, if someone were to send me an email, a social media message, fill out the form on my website about booking me to speak, I'm gonna, we ask up front, what is your budget? 80% of the time they'll answer. The other 20 they don't. And so, we tried, I had my assistant then sends them a message that says, hey, we really need to know what your budget range is, because before you get on the phone with Elizabeth. So in other words, we're not wasting Elizabeth's time. But I've been doing this 15 years now, right? So you can't do that at the beginning. So you get on the phone, hey, tell me about your event. Get them talking. Tell me about your event. Tell me what your plans are. What is your goal? What do you want to accomplish? How do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do? Right? So as a technology speaker, I'm sure some of the listeners are, right? They're like, what do you want them to do differently after I come in and present? It might be a tactic. It might be something technical that they need to learn, right? So what is that worth? If everybody in the room can suddenly manage this technology skill, like, what is that worth to the organization? Is that valuable? Like, that's something that you can ask them, but you also need to have an idea of know how valuable that is to the organization. The more valuable it is, the higher fee you can command in that conversation. And then what I would typically do is after I get them talking a little bit and they're warmed up, right? I'd just kind of slip it in. I'd be like, so what is your budget for this event, for bringing in a speaker? I've learned to say not for just for this event, right? Because then it might be the whole event. No, what is your budget for bringing a speaker in? What can you do? And sometimes they'll tell me, and other times they'll be like, "Oh, I'm just the admin. I'm calling for my boss. I want to get an idea." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And she's like, "So I really do need a number to take back." And I was like, "Well, did you bring a speaker in last year or the last event?" Sometimes, every once in a while, it's like, "This is our first time." And it's like, "Oh, darn it." But sometimes they'll say, "Oh, yeah, we had a speaker. It was this person." And then I'm online looking it up really quick. Right? So I'm online looking up what their budget range is posted as. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what they book at, but it gives you an idea, right? So I might look and see what they had. And sometimes, like the one I lost $9,000 on, they won't tell you anything. They're like, "No, no, 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 no. Tell me what your fee is." And I'm like, "Oh man, I got to say something, right?" So at that time, whatever number my rule, here's kind of the rule. Unless you're a CEO and your fee is really high, don't do this. Or you could. But my rule is whatever number pops in my head, double. It's really easy to negotiate down. It's really hard to negotiate up. Okay. So I might say, well, my fee is typically, or my fee starts at, and have that amount. So when I had that one, when I first started 15 years ago, my first one, I was booking, my previous booking had been $500. So I doubled it, $1,000. And they're like, "Great." Now, if they say great like that, you know you left money on the table. That's when you need to sell a book or something else, right? To try to move it up. And so they said, "Great." And I was like, "Oh." So then we do our pre-event call. They ended up buying a book for every person, so I got a little bit back. But then luckily my book was just coming out like right around that time, and so then we have this pre-event call, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're taking all of our top award earners to Puerto Rico for a vacation and a incentive trip with their families and paying for everything." And I'm sitting there going, "I left money on the table, right? And we're gonna do this, and the whole theme of the event is around you, and it's about aviation, and we're gonna do this, this, this." And I'm like going, "I left money on the table, right?" And so at the end of so everything he asked for, everything they asked for, if you at all possibly can, say yes. Don't argue, don't qualify, don't anything else. Just say, "I can do that. I can do that. I can do that." So everything he asked for, I said yes. And then at the end of the call, he goes, "Wow, you are so much easier to work with than the guy we paid $10,000 last year." But he
Yeah.
wouldn't tell me, shame on me, because I didn't know the industry, right? I didn't know his industry beforehand. And I hadn't done my research on that. I didn't know he wouldn't tell me who the speaker was the year before. He did on that phone call. It was a professional football player, right? So I, I learned a lot. And so unfortunately, that's how you learn a lot in this industry, is by making those mistakes and leaving money on the table. So now I've learned, I've learned some things. You could look at their industry, and that in that case, if I'd known more about the industry, I would have known they had a higher threshold than what I was previously being booked for nonprofits, right? So now I know those things.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah, and you have to learn from, you have to learn from these mistakes and just not make them again. So yeah, that totally makes sense. For the people who are watching or listening to our conversation, Elizabeth, and they're really gung-ho about becoming a professional speaker, what do they need to have in place before they leave their corporate jobs to go into speaking full time?
I would say you want to have at least, first of all, I would start while save up vacation time, and I would start while you are still working. And then when you get to the point where you're turning down paid engagements that are coming to you, like you can build your website while you're working. You can speak at some Rotary clubs and get some pictures of you speaking without their banners in the background, go from the side, right? There's things you can do and take a vacation day. right? So you can have your website up and running, depending on your company, right? Some people might have some exclusivity things with that, but in general, you can have most things done and ready while you're still working. And I would do that. So I would work on your speech. I would have your speech ready. I would do some getting out there for free. You know, you can contact a couple of the associations and be willing to speak for a lesser fee because you're earlier in your career, right? But that you know you're a good fit for. There's some things that you can do to get out there and get pictures, get video, and you're gonna have to pay for all that, right? So you want to do that while you're still bringing revenue in. And then when it gets to the point, and this is, I got laid off. But I was getting to that point where I was going to have to make a decision, right? Because I was doing engagements while I worked in my corporate job, my last one. And then right around the time I was turning down paid engagements, I got laid off. So they shut the plant down. So it was 2009, not a great economy time. So this is what I've been doing full time ever since, but they offered me a severance package and a bonus if I stayed and helped close the plant. So of course I stayed, and then I used that to help fund this. But if I was starting off and I hadn't still had that, I would say you need at least a year of income. Like whatever you're used to making in a year, I would say at least a year. It took me 3 years to replace my revenue. 3 years of a lot of Rotary clubs, chicken dinners, and things like that. Now, I wasn't doing both at the same time. I think you could do 1 year and have an overlap and use your vacation time and things for this, right? And it's work. It's no joke, right? So I think you could do a 1 year overlap and then have a 1 year. And then if you do the things that I mentioned in my book, you could shave easily could have shaved a year off. Easily.
Excellent.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
this is great information, Elizabeth, and I'm sure that the people listening or watching our conversation have gotten quite a bit of it, quite a bit from this conversation. So thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, if you want that book, I'll go to bookabilityfactor.com and it goes straight to a link to order Bookability Factor. That's the one. If you're listening to this and going, I need this, that's the one you want to go to. In general, on everything social, my website, everything is pilotspeaker.com or Pilot Speaker for social.
Okay.
So I'm really easy to find and remember.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Elizabeth.